So our first speaker has experience, really broad WordPress experience in all those areas. Has been everything from an engineer to a product development person, and he is going to talk about how to avoid overshoot in your WordPress projects. And he's going to kick off a string of really exciting talks today. Happy to have Chris Lema.
And so this morning what I want to do and start us off with is how to protect yourself from being really that dumb. How to limit yourself from overshoot. And sometimes it's just about the client. But today I want to focus a little on the roles that we play in that dynamic. Does that make sense? So let me start this interactive part of our time together by asking you some questions. And you can just raise your hand. How many of you have ever gone to a mechanic? Awesome. How many of you have ever gone to a dentist? I ask it that way because if I said how many of you have never gone to a dentist, you'd be really awkward to raise your hand. But you've gone to a dentist, you've gone to a mechanic. Now let me ask you this. How many times have you gone and sat in the chair at a dentist's office and told them, I think I have a problem with my right bicuspid, and I think I'm going to need a bridge, or I need an implant, but I want one with titanium screws? Anyone? No. And yet, you let customers tell you whether or not there's a slider on the homepage. You may interact with a mechanic and tell him, I'm hearing a tinky, tinky, tinky sound. But you don't tell him, I think there's a problem with the starter and the ignition timing. I mean, maybe some of you do, but most of us don't. And yet, you let a customer tell you all the different plugins that need to go onto their site. Let's start at the beginning. Oh, wow. That did something I didn't expect. I think we can all agree that every client has different needs. So I'm not talking about one type of client or another. Every client has different needs. And when we started working, wherever you are in your journey of building websites or designing websites, when we all started at the same place. Not sure how much skill we had, and therefore picking projects and clients that we knew we had just enough skill to start working on. Does that make sense? How many of you have had that experience? Right. And then what happens? Our skills improve. And as our skills improve, we get to the point where we want to start working on more complicated things. Things that engage our brain, not just our hands. So we want to build something more complicated. We want to build something that's nicer. We want to build something that we can put in our portfolio and be proud of. We enjoy the complex work, and frankly, we get paid better. Right? So what do? Well, if you're like me, if you're like any of the rest of us here, you start developing your own skills. You start getting better. You spend some extra time here and there. You even take on projects that are just outside your scope, and you think, I don't know exactly how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to figure it out because I want to know this thing. How many of you would go to a dentist who says, well, I don't really know how to put that bridge in, but I've really wanted to figure this out for a while, and I'm excited to do it with you? Any show of hands? And yet we do that and call ourselves professional, don't we? All right? It gets us into some trouble. I love this quote from Mike Tyson. If it is Mike Tyson, if not, maybe it's just found on the internet somewhere. But either way, everybody has a plan, right? And we think that plan's going to work. And we think, if I just build my skills and if I build my portfolio, eventually I get to a place where everyone will realize I'm awesome. And I'll be able to work on even more incredible projects, and I'll be able to get paid even more awesome amounts of money. And so, of course, why wouldn't I want to do that? And it feels like a good plan, and it feels like the right plan until it's not. Because ultimately what happens is suddenly we're thinking more about the what about the how than the what, right? We start thinking, right, that we're the ones that have to be entertained in the project. We're the ones that have to get excited. And so if you look at this picture, right, you notice the objective is way off to the side of the image, right? I mean, the whole point of watering a plant is so the plant grows, and yet the picture has us focused on the tools. I don't know about you, but I know some folks in their first set of conversations with a customer who start talking about the tools. They start talking about how they're going to build it. And they forget that the objective is the what. How many of you have ever asked a client if they wanted their site responsive? Okay, I'm not picking on you, but if your client doesn't know what responsive is, you know the logical dynamic of that conversation goes something like this. Are you going to want your site to be responsive? Yes. Yes, when the user clicks, of course I would want it to do something. And you're like, well, that's going to be extra. And they're like, extra for responsiveness? I need to find another developer. And the next developer's like, you going to want it responsive? Oh, they go to the next one. They say, well, do you want it to show up on a mobile phone? I didn't realize that my website wasn't going to show up on a mobile phone. And so we start trying to explain them the technology. Here's what responsive really means. Let's give it a new definition. And here's how it's going to work on your phone. And let's start telling them all of the hows. And we've miscued on the conversation we should be having, which is about the whats. In fact, sometimes when people talk about the whats, they talk about things like, well, you're going to want a website, and you're going to want the slider on the home page, and that's still not the whats. The truth is, the whats are, what do you do? Oh, you're in real estate, so what do you need? You need leads, so that your big deal is conversion. And so the question is then, how many leads can you get in? And from those leads, how many can you turn around quickly? Well, that's going to mean that the biggest deal is you reacting to them quickly and not a form letter. So how about when the lead comes in, we kick it straight to your phone, and you do one touch and call them straight back? And they're like, yes, that's what I need. And we haven't talked about a slider yet. And we haven't talked about the how at all. We've been focusing on the what. Does that make sense? But sometimes you want to bring the big guns. I got this super cool framework. Plus, I've built my own on top for child themes. And then I got this great plugin that I've hand-coded from scratch. And I've done this other stuff. And we bring power tools when the customer needs something really simple. What have we done? We've overshot. Other times, we just, we get into this brainstorming collaboration with customers where it's just, well, I think you need this. Well, I think I need this. Well, I think you probably also need this. Well, I think I need this. And we're getting excited because every time they speak or we speak, cha-ching, we're hearing the register kick off. It's going to be a bigger and bigger project. Only to find out at the end that they're like, can I get all that for $750? You're like, no. I just burned $750 having this conversation. And other times, we just sit there and just smile and nod and say yes. I don't know who came up with this idea. For years, when I used to talk about this particular idea, I had to draw it and pencil sketch it because no one was stupid enough to build a truck that wasn't a truck and a car that wasn't a car, but some combination of the two. And then they built it. And I don't know who decided to buy it, but eventually Ford figured out that not many people were buying it, and so they stopped making it. It doesn't exist anymore, other than people who've purchased it already. But that's what happens when you start saying yes to everything. Well, could it do this? Could it do that? How many of you are skilled at saying no to your customers? Okay, do you see how few hands are up? If you do a Google search on I say no a lot, do you know who shows up first? Me. I say no all the time. Sometimes it's to the whole project. Sometimes it's to parts of the project. But part of my job is to make sure that I'm being of value to my customer. And sometimes being of value means looking at them and saying no. Can you imagine if you went to your mechanic and you're like, by the way, I think you ought to change all the belts in the car. He's like, I think you're loony. I think you should not be a mechanic. And you're like, I'm not. I'm a web developer. He's like, then you should stop talking. I interact with customers in a particular way. When we first start having this discussion, I actually talk to them about dentists and mechanics. And when we're done talking about it, I'm like, look, there's going to come a point in time when you start talking to me about something, and I'm going to look at you, and I'm just going to ask you, when was the last time you were at the dentist? And that's cue for, we shouldn't be having this conversation. Only one of us is the professional in one of these spaces. I won't tell you how to sell shoes. Let's not talk about conversions on the web as if both of us have equal experience. We don't. Now, you can do that politely. You don't have to be a jerk. But it's critical that you learn how to say no. Or you'll die by 1,000 cuts. So, someone smarter than I created this graphic. For designers, it's awesome. It says, over time, you're going to get to a point where your client satisfaction starts dropping below the satisfaction of the designer. And this is what they call the law of diminishing tweaks. I think that's awesome. It's exactly what I talk about. And so I adjusted it, right? Because I also call it the zone of lost profit. The more you spend time in this space, the more you're in trouble. When I talk about overshoot, which is the whole point of this conversation, what am I really talking about? Well, the truth is that at some point, we get so enamored with what we're doing that we lose sight of what the customer actually needs. And because of that, we end up in this dynamic where we've crossed over a line. And every time you go into overshoot, trust me, there's another competitor who's coming up doing a little upmarket climb who's going to figure out how to do less for less and take your customers away. It's not a place you want to be in. I created that other picture over there for you. And it basically highlights this reality that says when we define success, it's not what I want. It's not even what my client wants. It's not even what my client needs. It's what my clients' clients need. I'll say that one more time. When I define success, it's not what I want. It's not what my client wants. It's not what my client needs. It's what my clients' clients need. And when you can be the person who helps them figure that out, there's a lot of money to be made in that space. And it turns out your costs actually go down. So I'm going to end by telling you one more silly story. A simple example. I don't know if you can see, but this is 99 Designs. You can buy a logo there for $99. I don't recommend that you run an entire business on a $99 stock logo site. But here's the thing. I work with a lot of startups and a lot of entrepreneurs who are literally in their first months or two. And sometimes they don't have a lot of money, and they don't even know what their brand's going to be. And so sometimes I'll just say, just go grab a logo. Your first 6 customers are not going to pick you because of your logo. So don't stress. You can rebrand if you're making money and surviving as a company. At the same time, you can buy a theme at Studio Press that is not only the framework plus the theme, but for $79.95. So if you do the math, and it's early in the morning, but that's basically 80 and 100. So for $180, you can get yourself a site and a logo. The result is empowered by Pierce. Now, I know that there are people who will look at this and go, you took the stock solution. You didn't even change the colors. It happened that those were her favorite colors. But you didn't change one bit of it. Plus you put a logo that was pre-done and you put it all on the site. Do you know why this site works? Because she doesn't care about a website. She worked in a church. She'd been doing leadership and focus work in terms of developing young girls. And she wanted to start working not only with young girls, but young businesswomen. And she wanted to build a leadership institute for them. And she wanted to quit her full-time job so that she could do this thing that was her passion. And all she needed was a landing page where she could tell them about the Leadership Intensive. All she needed was one page where she could determine whether or not people were going to buy enough so that she could quit her job. 4 months ago, she quit her job because this thing's $1,200. And she has enough customers to pay her living. And she's not debating colors or logos because what her customers needed was the description and a place to sign up and give her her money. Make sense? I happen to use a bunch of tools. These are some of them. This slide deck will be online, so in fact, it already is, so you can go see it there. Some of these tools are awesome, but the whole point is to just get people to be able to do things quickly and minimize their costs. You don't need to start from scratch on a lot of what you're doing. My name's Chris Lema. You can find me at chrislema.com, and I tweet Chris Lema. And go sign up. If you want to sign up for the membership, I have a new ebook coming out on Overshoot literally in the next week. Thank you very much.
You said that's online. Is that on your website, or where can we find it at?
So-
I think it is.
The question is just where can we find this stuff online?
This slide deck should be at chrislema.com. One of the top links is presentations, and it should be there. If not, it's often at speakerdeck.com/chrislema.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes for questions, and just wait for the microphone, and they'll get up to you, and they'll ask you the question, and then we can go from there. Just a couple if you have any.
Come.
Hi. Is this on?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. If you work for a big corporation where there's a lot of people making big decisions, how do you move forward with your own vision?
It's a great question. So if I happen to work in a big organization, I will say that the easiest way is to take the top spot. That's really helpful. So if you have a top spot, you can make it everything your way all the time. So I cheat that way. But I think the real issue is if you have a particular vision and you want to drive through a larger organization, I don't know of another way other than crazy politics to essentially share that vision and to adjust it as you share it with people so that they can find buy-in too. And the larger and larger group you have that have all bought into the same vision will ultimately become a fait accompli. You'll just be in a place where everyone's like, yeah, that's the big deal. You got to spend the time networking and building that consortium.
So how do you take an existing client who's been given all the buy-in they want and all of the leeway in making all the decisions they want and train them into recognizing you as a professional?
What I like to do is I like to send them to Jake Goldman. If you don't know Jake, by all means, everybody knows Jake. That does explain a lot. He gets things, and Jake works on very large systems, and he gets these $2,000 leads, and he's like, what the hell are they doing here? It's because I send them that way. The truth is, retraining anyone, anything, is really, really hard work. It's going to mean first having a come to Jesus meeting, right? And do that face-to-face. Don't text, don't email, don't even phone call. Get face-to-face and walk through, look, we need to work this through here. And that's hard, and I know a lot of people that don't do it. I was lucky. That first friend of mine, she ended up moving across the country. And so then I had a nice segue to say, I can't help you with those lifetime updates anymore. You need to find someone out there. But your clients aren't going to move, or not all of them. So you need to have a one-on-one conversation and say, look, this isn't working the way it needs to. Don't go to him. Go to the guy up there. I don't trust what Jake's going to ask.
Be loud enough. I like your analogy.
Well, they're going to record it for video. So.
Oh, sorry. I liked your analogy in the beginning with the dentist and the mechanic. One thing it seems to me that's different for us is that the accessibility for the client to go online and see examples and see all that's out there and just how much has exploded in the last couple of years. They get all these ideas in their heads. So how do you say, okay, I know what you saw, but forget about that?
I don't think I've ever asked anyone to forget anything. I think sometimes it's really helpful to have a session of education where you sit down and you look at stuff together and you say, yeah, this looks pretty. If you want, let's call these people up and ask what their conversion rate is, right? Most of the time people are looking for conversion. They're looking for closure, they're looking for leads, they're looking for something. And let's have a conversation about that. Let's not have a conversation just on how pretty it is. Everybody is an N equals 1, my opinion works. And you're like, that's great, but your opinion isn't qualified, so let's go figure out what we need to figure out.
Something that I always struggle with is I really liked how you kind of put it, saying what your clients want, and I always say what your customers want. But I find that most businesses or owners of businesses know best, and they know everything, and it's hard for them to change that perspective and do something that is really, enabling their customers to be successful at using their website. So what approaches do you use to kind of help them make that mental transition?
Well, we don't have tons of time to go through all of them, but I'll give you one model that I've used with a couple clients is we change the metrics of pay. So I don't get paid by the hour. I get paid by the conversion. So it dramatically changes the dynamic when I'm not asking them to pay me for my hours. I'm asking them to pay for the number of conversions past a baseline that we agree upon. So if they're getting 200 leads a month and they've gotten that for the last 8 months, and now we affix a value for that customer, a value for that lead, a value for that conversion, and we define what the leads are and what the conversions are, and then we say, okay, I'll just get paid this much. It's essentially creating a royalty mechanism for the software. And business owners are like, well, that's great. So if nothing happens, I don't have to pay you. I'm like, if nothing happens, it was a failure. All right, last one.
Hi, long-time listener, first-time caller. My question is, your graphic that had that margin between designer, have you found any ways to cut that in half, or have you found any ways to shrink that in any kind of way, besides Photoshop?
Yeah. No, there are tools that help, but I think that the bigger deal is us, right? The culprit in that dynamic that's overshooting is us. We're the ones who are, for our own professionalism, spending more and more time getting it more and more perfect. How many of you are not obsessive about your work?
Define obsessive.
Yeah, see? Right? Because the truth is we all are, and so we want it better and better, and we may spend, right, the whole point of my new ebook's called Design for the Colorblind. It has absolutely nothing to do with colorblindness, but it has to do with the fact that, if you spend a week working on shades of blue for a colorblind guy, for his website, you're going to have wasted the week. You may be delighted, right? But one of my clients was colorblind, and so I showed it to him, and I'm like, after a week, I check this out, and he's like, can I have my wife look at it? I'm like, why? He's like, I can't see the differences between blues. And at that point, I'm like, I'm such an idiot. All right, thank you guys very much.